All right, let's get right to it because this video needs to be a grounding rod for a lot of individuals who want to think about Social Security benefits going forward. And the reason why we have to do this video is because at this point, I'm seeing a lot of incorrect responses to essentially what's happening in our nation when it comes to dealing with fraud. Now, I think a lot of people understand that the DOGE, Department of Governmental Efficiency, is a bad thing, right? It has evil qualities. It also has beneficial qualities. What I think a lot of people are kind of missing with this entire situation, just to be fair, is the story of Social Security fraud. Yes, it's breaking news. New York, Logan, West Virginia, Carlsbad, California, Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, Batesville, Arkansas, Columbus, Ohio, Okemos, Michigan. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Texas, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Las Vegas, Nevada. How do you ever pronounce that? I mean, what is that? Nacogdoches. I have no idea. Point I'm getting at is all these Social Security offices are being closed. I mean, they were on the way to being closed before the DOGE, but before Elon Musk was even a part of the federal government. But the bottom line is they are officially being closed down now. And I think one of the problems that we have is that people don't understand why this is happening, why Social Security benefits are being touched, why it seems like President Trump is talking about how he's not going to touch Social Security benefits, but then he's also saying he's going to improve them. But at the same time, there seems to be a lot of changes to the Social Security Administration. I want to go back in time to a very important timeline, very incredibly important. I want you to watch this video, and I want you to understand that this was from 5 years ago. 5 years ago. You will notice that the commissioner talking is Trump's old SSA commissioner. You will notice that the inspector general talking is Trump's old inspector general who stepped down right at the end of President Biden's presidency. Watch this video and then start to realize this problem has been growing for a while. Check this out. What we have here is Congress.
Chair, thank you for hosting, for calling this hearing today. Commissioner, let me start with you. I'm struck by the fact that these reports of scams with the SSA has displaced what was the
5 years
most
ago
popular, most prevalent scam in recent years, which is IRS scamming. And so on that note, I'm just wondering, have you consulted with officials, you or your administration consulted with officials at the IRS to see what worked or didn't work for them in combating that very prevalent IRS scam in recent years?
Okay, so what did we learn right there? Real quick, we learned that the SSA 5 years ago became the keystone of an agency that had rampant scamming, rampant fraud. Okay, replaced the IRS. It became the keystone. Now, some will argue right now that USAID is essentially the king of fraud, the king of scams. A good argument. I would stand behind that. But 5 years ago, a politician said to the then Commissioner Saul, "What are you doing about the fraud at the SSA?"
We're the lucky ones now, Senator. They've shifted to us. And as I said, I do believe that this is going to be expanded unless we can really do a good job in cutting it off. Yes, our people obviously have looked at other agencies, Justice Department, Inspector General, of course, is working with other agencies, and so is our people. And a lot of the efforts that we are doing, various mailers, social media, all these efforts, a lot of it is based on learning from other agencies.
Are there lessons in particular that stand out from the agencies that you've consulted with, whether it's the IRS, DOJ, or others?
I'm not sure of that. I know that this whole program that we've developed has been aided by other people's efforts in the area. So this is not something that we've invented completely on our own. It's a joint effort.
Senator, if you don't mind, I have something if I could add.
Please.
Okay, so real quick, we just got a shitty answer from President Trump's prior commissioner, Commissioner Saul, where he didn't really know how he was going to combat the fraud in the form of scams that were occurring at the SSA. In fact, you're now going to see the Inspector General from that time period, who was put in by Trump, jumping in to try and save face for the SSA because their commissioner at that time didn't know how they were going to actually fight the scams, didn't know what systems they were using to fight the scams. Here's the Inspector General to go ahead and back that up.
We have coordinated closely with the Treasury Inspector General's office and learned from their playbook. And the online form that the agency helped us develop was right out of their playbook. But I will say some of the other efforts they've done, which I don't want to reveal, worked for them. But the scammers are very inventive, and the minute something works, they change. And so we have to, it's sort of playing catch up a lot. So what worked then, it may not work again today. And so we're trying to always stay ahead of it, but it's difficult.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Ennis, while I have you, let me ask you a couple of.
Okay, so just to be clear, they realized 5 years ago that the scams were the greatest out of every agency in the federal government. They put you guys all on notice in Congress that they had a plan. Well, the commissioner didn't really know what the plan was, but that they had a plan to use the playbook that the IRS had. But at the end of the day, they needed to customize it because the scammers were constantly inventing new ways to get money out of the agency and or its recipients. Okay. Think about where you guys all were when it comes to email scams. And here, I've got a list of all the different types of scams the SSA faces, right? Where were you 5 years ago when it comes to these, right? Automated robocalls, automated text scams. What about fraudulent direct mail and email scams? What about exploitation of data glitches, right? So, that's kind of where scammers will go in and falsely claim, that there are millions of deceased individuals receiving benefits, or there are, in fact, some deceased individuals receiving benefits. Literally they're claiming that Elon has frauded the SSA's reputation by claiming that there's all these people receiving benefits. Some of them are. It's obviously not in the millions like they're, saying, but bottom line is some of them are. Targeting vulnerable populations. Okay, we're talking about individuals that don't have a lot of tech training, people in their 70s. They don't have it. 80s, 90s, they definitely don't have it. People that live in tribal groups, they don't have tech knowledge, right? Or technology. They don't have that. So a lot of these scams and frauds are happening to them. So then there's also things like, for example, impersonation scams, phishing scams, fake website scams. Bottom line is there's a lot of scams going on. Now, with that said and understanding, you now know that 5 years ago, there was a massive, massive problem. And we are just now getting back to it. All right, let me show you something else, okay? Because this is important. You should know this, because if you don't know this, it's later. Let me pull it up real quick. Hold on. All right, let's take a look over here. Over here. Where is it? Okay, this video right here. All right, let me get this set up. All right, right over here. This guy, he's angry. He's pissed off. He's 6 months ago in Congress. Again, widely available on YouTube so that people could understand exactly what the problem is. Pre-Trump, basically Elon in their, obviously Trump's second term. Here you go.
Truth about math. Because the truth gets you unelected and a bunch of really angry ads at home.
Yeah, so just so you know, what he said was, if any of these politicians point out that the country is failing because it's massively in debt and can't afford its debt, then what happens is the banking industry in control of that debt will actually hire people to create ads that attack the politician and get them unelected back in their home state.
So this place runs around and avoids telling the truth. So let's walk through another little factoid. My math basically says this year,
2024,
45.68% of all the income tax collections, receipts, your government takes in just cover the cost of interest. I'd been coming behind the microphone and saying, hey, interest in 2024, this fiscal year, would be somewhere around a little less than 1.2 trillion. I apparently have that wrong. It's probably going to come in about 1 trillion, 140 to 60 billion. Either way, I'm off a fraction. But 45.68% of every dime we're collecting in your income tax now just pays interest.
Credit card payments, loan
and I've tried
payments.
to say over and over and over at home and other places, and you get people to just stare at you and go, huh? Who really runs this government? Seriously, it's an honest question.
Okay, so focus on that for a moment. Who really runs this government? Is it the American people? Obviously not, because if it was the American people, Social Security would be funded. I mean, that's an easy one, right? Are it the big corporations, right? Well, the big corporations want America to be out of debt and, able to spend more on its population with Medicare and Medicaid, because then its population can be healthy. They want Americans to be healthy to be able to work. So the big corporations aren't really running this thing because it's definitely going down. So who's really running this giant, massive corporation known as the United States of America? Is it the politicians? I think they're super not in control, but I think they're manipulated by super wealthy people. Let's take a look real quick.
I need you to think like adults. Maybe those who actually went to a finance class. Who actually now runs this government? I'm going to argue the debt markets, the bond markets from around the world. If you have to bring almost 10 trillion to market this fiscal year, two and a quarter trillion virgin new issues because we're borrowing. It's like $75,000 to $80,000 a second right now. And the economy is good. The actual baseline data on GDP is good, and you're still burning almost $80,000 a second in borrowing. What happens the second you have a U.S. debt auction that's undersubscribed or there's not enough people there? What happens to U.S. interest rates? How much of the world goes into... But we're going to talk about that. Oh, God, no, because that would require math. That would require being serious. We passed a bill here earlier today. I voted no on it. And look, they worked hard on it. They lowered the top line spending. But you got to deal with a really uncomfortable discussion. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed.
Right there. Right there.
Okay, let's process that. Every dime a member of Congress votes on is borrowed, and depending on some of the projections, about a quarter of Medicare. Social Security has its own trust fund. It runs out in like 9-10 years. And then we got to figure out what's going to happen there. And we can continue to get Democrats coming behind the microphone and lying about it, which makes it almost impossible to actually lay out the math and try to fix it. And remember, raising the cap, doing the Democrats' plan of $400,000 up and just raising the cap only covers about 38% of the shortfall. You had the president in that debate last month saying, if we just tax rich people 1% more. And I have a chart in here that will show it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the shortfall. Remember, if you take $400,000 and up, the Democrats' definition of rich, and you tax them at 12.4%, you only cover 38% of the shortfall. So 1%. And this is the nature of our discussion.
All right. So what I'm trying to get across to you guys is that, first of all, passing the Social Security 2100 Act, right, is never going to happen because the rich are never going to allow the politicians to vote in a 12.4. And it's actually more than that because they'll have to pay for some Medicare on top of that once that thing finally gets voted through the floor, which means, 15, 16, potentially up to almost 17% more. The tax will be rich on whatever income they make. Do you think the super rich or those earning above $400,000 are going to want to pay, 12.4 up to potentially 16, 17% more on their income? No, it's cheaper for them to get other politicians hired that won't allow that to happen. It'll never pass. Now, with that said, the questions raised by this politician are very simple. Who is actually running the show? Because it doesn't make sense why America has gone so deep into debt, where we're almost at 50% of whatever we have coming in going to pay for the payments on that debt. So if we're really, really thinking about where money goes, we need to look to the banks, because the banks are in the, let's call it like it is, they're in the loan game. They loan money. That's how they mostly make money. It's not from fees on little stuff. It's not from, fines on little stuff. It's fees on big stuff, bonds, stuff like that. So if we go to the banks and we look at the largest banks on planet Earth, who has the most money to play with? These are basically the groups that win. And I'm just going to be very straight with you about what they are, how they work, etc. The top 4 banks on planet Earth are the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the Agricultural Bank of China, the China Construction Bank, and the Bank of China. The next, number 5 on this list, which I thought was number 1. I truly believe this was number 1. Okay. So the bottom line with this is that number 5 is JP Morgan Chase. JP Morgan Chase. There are 4 Chinese banks bigger than JP Morgan Chase. After that is Bank of America, then HSBC, then BNP Paribas, then you've got the Mitsubishi UFJ Financial Group, Credit Agricole, Postal Savings Bank of China, Citigroup, SMBC Group, Banco Santander, Bank of Communications of China, Wells Fargo. You've got Mitsuho Financial Group, Barclays, Society General, UBS. Then you've got Group BPCE, and then finally, in spot number 22, Goldman Sachs. What I'm getting at with this video is to understand that a lot of you are hating on some individuals that have no control over this. A lot of you are aggressive towards SSI recipients, right? How dare they? They haven't paid into the system. Why are we giving them benefits? That's the classic argument, right? Supplemental security income people, they must be evil, right? That's the classic argument. I disagree. The program, which I still every day have a hard time believing it, although people tell me that Nixon was way more liberal than what the movies show, Nixon voted in the most liberal program that ever existed on planet Earth, known as supplemental security income. It's got 3 main veins, right? It's for poor disabled people who haven't paid in enough, poor elderly people who haven't paid in enough, and entrants, okay? Asylum seekers, refugees, people who are trafficked, stuff like that. So the point is, these are not the people that are masterminding mass financial fraud. It's not them. It's not the retired people, the Social Security disability recipients, the spouses, the widows, the disabled children. It's just not those people. But yet I see consistently people attacking Social Security recipients for mass fraud. Are there some people who are receiving a check who are obviously still not alive? Absolutely. Are there children created by SSA personnel who have attached them to somebody who has passed away, and now those children receive an auxiliary benefit even though the person who passed away is real, but the children and their fake Social Security numbers are not? Does fraud exist within the SSA? Does fraud exist for people who have passed away? Absolutely. But where is this big fraud really coming from? We saw 5 years ago that scams were reaching beyond IRS scams. The Social Security Administration 5 years ago, brought forward by the politician, responded to by the then Commissioner Saul, and then who had to be backed up by the OIG at that point, the Inspector General, Gail Ennis. We now know that it was around that time period that the SSA was crowned the ultimate scam capital of the United States. How did we do over the past 5 years? Now, I'm going to be going through in a comparison between the DOGE findings and also the OIG findings so that you can understand what OIG found and what they missed compared to what Elon Musk is talking about. But again, I go back to the final thing and the final question before we go to the next video, and I want you to really think about this. Who's committing the greatest fraud against the American people? Who is scamming the American people the largest amount? Is it A, the recipients of benefits? Is it B, right, those who are running the Social Security Administration? I mean, to be fair, they're just behind the ball. They're behind the ball on fixing a lot of this stuff. They're trying to catch up right now. Is it the new DOGE and Elon Musk? Is he the mastermind at creating fraud from fraud to potentially pull everybody's information, do a massive, figure out what they love, what they need, what they want from their, Social Security file, and then magically sell them new stuff and make lots of money? Or would it be the politicians? Well, the politicians are the voice of those who control them. It's supposed to be the American people, but realistically, it's the billionaires. At the end of the day, the group that essentially controls the greatest amount of fraud occurring with the Social Security Administration, those would be the banks, the biggest banks on planet Earth. And the top 4 controlled by China. You have to go 4 banks until you even make it to JP Morgan Chase, and then Bank of America, and then HSBC. Okay? And there's another little factoid in here, which I thought was pretty interesting. If you go look at essentially the banks that are controlled by the countries and which countries control the most mega banks, this tells you exactly who's in control of the loan market. Now, China has 20, number of banks in the top 100 banks on planet Earth. United States is 12, Japan is 8, France is 6, South Korea is 6, United Kingdom 6, Canada 5, Australia 4, Brazil 4, Germany 4, Netherlands 3, Singapore 3, Spain 3, India 2, Italy 2, Russia 2, Sweden 2, Switzerland 2. My point is, if you read through this chart, you know exactly which groups are controlling the bond market and the loan market and the reserve currency use across the entire planet Earth. Now, here's what I want you to think about. Can any of you tell me why, after all of this time, Elon Musk and Donald Trump have not brought up the fraud that's occurring with the cost of living adjustment and how completely unfair it is for Social Security recipients, for federal employees who receive a larger amount for the next year based on essentially the math they came up with as to how inflation works? A nonprofit released a report from 1999 all the way to around 2022 that people are supposed to be getting around $500 more per month in Social Security benefits, but they're not, because they changed the math that they use for the cost of living adjustment. And as a result of that, people do not get a fair Social Security amount based off of the original rules that were created. And people, based on the 1937 ruling from the Supreme Court, don't get to sue the government to fix it. Which means the only entity that can fix the cost of living adjustment, since you have no private right to your benefits, would be the government itself. That's it. You have no right to sue them over the changes. You don't. These taxes, literally taxes, were ruled by the Supreme Court, these FICA taxes, as nothing but taxes. So, my question to you is, what is it going to take to fix the cost of living adjustment so that you guys actually get the money you're supposed to for the next year? Next question. How do we go ahead and fix the debt crisis, ergo how much we pay as a country in the amount of money per month to those bills we owe, because we got a lot of debt and we got a lot of loans and a lot of bonds out there. Did you know the United States, one of the larger bond groups that the United States uses, is that they take your paid in FICA taxes and convert them into special interest bonds that, over a period of time, up to 15 years, become mature, and then they borrow money or print money to be able to pay back those bonds and the interest due on them. And the interest due on them is at such a low rate that you are now finding out that the SSA can't afford to pay you your retirement benefits in 9 years at the full level that you're currently getting. Who do we blame? Do we blame the SSI people, most of which do not have a college degree? They don't have finance knowledge. We always blame them, but it's not for them. Do we go ahead and blame the disabled people who do have a college degree on SSDI benefits? What about the retired who have all kinds of degrees, master's, doctorate? Do we blame them? Do we blame the politicians? Do we blame Elon? Do we blame Trump? Do we blame President Biden? Who do we blame? We blame those who financially have control over the bond market and the general loan market, because these are the groups who are ruining America's ability to fix its own effing problems. America didn't owe half of what it makes off of the labor of the American people to literally credit card bills, mortgage bills, grant bills, everything, all of it, sending money overseas bills, which, obviously USAID is now winding down. But I guess my point to you about this entire thing is, how do you prosecute the biggest banks on planet Earth? Because remember, banks make the most money off of interest, bonds, loans, etc. And the biggest borrower out there is the United States government. And you have to understand, the weird thing is, if the United States government can't pay for its military, then how hard is it going to be for some other country to topple it? Because remember, the first battle is a financial one. The second battle that could end the war is an actual heated combat situation. Now, a lot of Americans have never experienced an attack on the United States. And then many Americans have via the 9/11 situation. And there have been smaller little instances here and there. But my point to you is this: if America can't control its military because it can't control the amount of debt it has, because too much money that we pay in taxes is being paid to pay for bonds, to pay for loans, etc., where does that leave America? Now, you'll hear a lot of YouTubers talking about a $5,000 stimulus. The math is coming more around $500 to $1,500. But the bottom line about this situation is, if we don't find a way to fight the banks, then there's no way that we can survive as the big bad of planet Earth. There's no way that we can survive. You will notice that Germany has just published documentation about its fiscal responsibility and military capability plan to not rely on anything from America in the future. Because, as you've seen, as they've quoted, Europe is not expecting America to back it in a war in the future. Now, have you thought about what happens when Europe has to stand up and not use America as its backdrop? Well, they got to spend a lot of money on military machines. They got to figure out how to go ahead and compete against nations like Russia and China. But just think about that for a moment. If America didn't have to play the ultimate war game boss, what happens to these other nations? What will they start doing? And then you have to wonder, why were we giving so much money to Europe in the first place? Obviously, the American people need their Social Security benefits. Obviously, the American people need the government to not spend more money. Obviously, the American people need the government to not have a massive loan problem. So the reason why I do this video is not to applaud Elon. It's actually not, because look, Donald Trump and Elon, they should have done a better job with releasing how they get this information, how they're approaching it. They should have had a more level playing field with the leadership and the delivery of the information. They should have had some Democrats, some Republicans, and Elon in the mix of it. Okay. They should have had that. That's why you're getting all this uppity up. But imagine how disgusting it is that you get people who are so extreme that they're okay with the fraud. Then you get the people more in the middle where they're not okay with the fraud, but they just don't want Elon having access to their information. And then you get a little bit more to the right, and you end up with people saying, investigate the entire federal government completely. My point to you is, you saw a video 5 years ago where a politician said to the commissioner of the Social Security Administration put in by Trump, okay? Trump, 5 years ago, commissioner, he put in, who did not have an answer for the fraud and scams that were going on inside the SSA. Now it's front and center. And that is because if the United States continues on this path of borrowing money to pay for things, the Social Security Administration will not be able to afford itself. That means if it can't afford to hire enough people to continue to work the field offices, the regional offices, the policy offices, the payment offices, the DDS offices, if it cannot afford them, then even though your money is in, you won't be able to access it. You ever stop and think about that? How do you go ahead and hurt the SSA, which will directly hurt the recipients? Well, it's easy. You just go ahead and make sure it doesn't have the money to run the administration portion of it. Did you think it was going well under Biden? Did you think it was going well under Trump with his first term? No. These problems keep happening. And they will continue to happen because the United States of America cannot afford to fix the Social Security Administration until it fixes its debt problem as a result of specifically bonds and loans that it has out. I did this video because you need to be on target with why this is happening. All right. With that said, I will catch you guys at the next video where I'm going to go live and answer questions. You get 7-minute block where you can call in. Bottom line is this, you know the rules, but we'll go through them in the next video. Please remember to like and subscribe. Head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida, and throw some stars up there. They always kind of pump me up to go ahead and do stuff. I know it's super late right now, and I know I'm supposed to go live around 8-ish, but I worked at the law firm a lot. Kosherish, there you are. I need you to resend that email to me, by the way. I don't have that email. I searched 2 computers for it. Kosherish, send me that email again. So the bottom line is this. I didn't even get to all the phone calls today. I have to answer more phone calls from people that called today at the law firm because it was just overload. Bottom line is this. The next video I do, I'll be answering questions for free about Social Security benefits. Specifically, hopefully we stick to disability law. I know people like to kind of wander a little bit. Please remember, Mondays and Thursdays, I go live. And if you need a private session, there's a 1-hour contract in the little mini contract in the bio below. Check it out. I'll catch you a little bit later, and I will see you at the next video in about 5 to 10 minutes. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.